Welcome back, my fellow YouTubers. So it's a pretty nice day today. It reached 100. Today we're actually finally be able to remove this suspension, rotors and calipers. I'm excited. This is going to be quite a bit of work to do, but I'm going to do my very best to record pretty much as much detail as possible. Simple job. It's not too complex. You just need some standard tools, a lot of space, and the car lifted up on jack stands. It's recommended, so you get a little bit more clearance and you have a lot more room to work with. But let's get to it. Like I mentioned before, my channel is not really a do-it-yourself channel. I try to give some information on the process, and I'm going to do my best on this. Basically going to do one front and one rear, so you guys get a good idea of pretty much what's needed to work on if you have an SLK. The first thing I do is I look over the entire braking system. The first thing I got to loosen, and I already started, is brake sensing wire. There's a speed sensor, a wheel speed sensor, and obviously your brake line. Those are the three attachments that you're gonna have to detach. And since I'm removing the actual suspension itself, the main strut assembly, it's gonna have to be removed from the actual hub down here. First thing, we're gonna start here. This is gonna be obviously an 8mm, and that is pretty much it. We got a new brake wire sensor, so this is obviously gonna go in the trash. So we're gonna move this aside for now. Now the brake wire clip down here, and obviously this clip up here. I mean, the brake sensing wire is gonna be right here. It's very, very soft, so you wanna make sure you don't damage this insulation that's around it. Just remember where these wires go. Actually loosen the speed sensor that's down here. You have to pry it open a little. Just move this out of the way. My vehicle is going to be up on stands for a little while, so I'm going to cover these later on with a little baggie. I want to just put this on the side over here, away from everything else. Down here is the wheel speed sensor. It's in a very tight location, but you should be able to access it with a 10mm wrench. Just loosen it. This is just as quick. You can do the rest by hand. Once you get it out, just get the 10mm bolt out of the way. And now this sensor, be very gentle with it. A little cleaning later on, for sure. It's pretty much like a little magnetic sensor. That's it right there. Just pop it loose from these clips up here. And again, just move it to the side. I'm going to be replacing the actual brake lines. So this entire brake line is going to be gone. This brake line, and you can see it's already starting to seep. I went ahead and got this tool, so I have my splash cloth on the bottom, so it catches any brake fluid, so it doesn't touch the floor. This is obviously going to be an 11. All right, now I still have the cap on, so not too much of it drips out. So you're going to be using the bolt. There you go. I think that works really well. So the next step of the process is getting this caliper off. We're taking off two 18mm bolts. And as you can tell, the top's already loose. I'm loosening the bottom right now as I speak. The next thing is to get the goddamn stopper off on the line. So since I'm not worried about this line, I'm just going to let this sit. I actually had quite a bit more pad than I thought. So here you go, our 6-piston caliper. And it is pretty massive for this little car. So pretty much all it's held by is just two 18mm bolts. There's the lower bracket for it, so the bolts go on to. Obviously it's going to get a new brake line. We're going to take the hardware out, clean it up. We have new pads, and we're going to prep this paint. We're going to go ahead and remove this this floater. Maybe a 30 Torq. It doesn't really need that much force. Everything was actually torqued to spec, to be honest. Nothing was over tightened or done by another do-it-yourselfer that probably just did it German tight. So everything should come off really, really easy, which it has so far. Yep, see it? Seems pretty good. I got no play. All right, so that's one right there. Next step is to get the sway bar link out. Now, just to make this a little simple, so since we're replacing the suspension with new coilovers, I'm not going to be taking off the top portion of this sway bar link. It's unnecessary since this is coming off anyway. I am just going to remove it from the bottom. And you're going to need a T30 Torq and a wrench, obviously, 18mm to be exact, to get it off. And you use both in conjunction so this does not spin, and you can lock it in place and loosen the nut. And then you can just hammer it out. You can see what I'm doing. I'm using the wrench or the ratchet to hold it in place. So me having hold it with my other hand, I'm using the lower thrust arm and part of the outer tie rod. Once you do that, this pretty much just comes on its own. When everything's factory spec'd, torqued, everything comes off so easy compared to someone just tightening it and not knowing how much they're torquing it down to. There you go, it is out. Trusty hammer, a couple of knocks, and that's pretty much it. Now that I have a lot more space cleared up, I can take 3 bolt placements. This top mount up here for the upper knuckle, and there's 2 down here that hold this hub in place, this plating. And there are 19, and then obviously the one up here is going to be an E-Torque, a very big E-Torque, and a wrench just to hold this nut in place, or it should be held in place anyway, but for the most part that's pretty much what we got to do. And of course the 3 up top. Now the last thing I got to do is just pretty much remove these 13mm bolts. Again, they don't require that much force. I did pre-loosen this one. Now since nothing's really holding that strut, it might topple a little bit, but I'm not too worried about that at this point. Yeah, look at all that room. Now it gives me some time to inspect each bushing, and I'll have some space just to check the in and outer tie rods and check that boot as well. But for my previous inspection, everything was actually solid. The suspension, the actual assembly is actually pretty clean. There's no visible leaks anywhere. This pretty much is from the brake line fluid. A little bit got on here. I do got to take off this cover though. But the shock's in relatively great shape. But other than that, this vehicle is going to be fun to drive once I'm done with it. Everything's nice and clean. Look at this engine bay. Right, so next up is the rears. Now the rears are a little bit more different from the fronts for obvious reasons. We got a 4-piston caliper here. Now what I mean by different is they're held by E-Torque bolts. So if you look closely, you see 2 E-Torques right down there. So we got 2 E14s that we got to remove in a very tight spot. This process is still the same. The brake line is right over there in the back. We're going to pretty much remove it, and with our tools, just like the front, we're going to use these to stop it, and that's pretty much it. It's a very tight spot back over here because of this sway bar link. Now you could remove it, but it's not really necessary. An 11mm multi-point can get that E-torque, but just be very, very careful and not to exert too much force. This doesn't really require too much as long as it's factory torqued. These should come off relatively smoothly, just like the fronts. If someone's touched it before and they over tighten it, you could be into some problems. Alright folks, we're pretty much under the SLK, and to remove the rear springs, it's relatively simple. I don't have that much space. It is kind of hot outside, and I am just trying to get this done, so forgive me for the quick layout of how to do this, but it's pretty simple. If you guys can do the front pretty easily, this is no different. Just you have to worry about a preloaded spring, which is right there. What I did, which pretty much a lot of you already know, is obviously a jack. Now, there's not much tension when the vehicle's up on jack stands and the suspension is just hanging with no tires, so it's not really that much compressed. But just to be on the safe side, you put obviously the jack underneath this section right here. There's like a little cup right here where the jack plate can actually sit on, rest on when you push it up, and you just want to compress it just a little bit just to hold it in place. And to release the rear control arm, it's pretty much an 18mm bolt on both ends. Obviously you have your ratchet on this side and your wrench on the other side to hold it in place to keep it from spinning. Once you do that, you just keep on taking it out, keep on doing it, and it should come out. Relatively simple. Once you do that, you can slowly release the tension from your jack, and it won't really pop or anything like that, so don't be too frightened. It's just gonna drop just about there, and that's pretty much it. And it'll give you your room just to mess with this and pry the spring out and release the actual bolt for the lower part of the shock, and that's pretty much it. Now, the top portion is no different. You do not have to take off all of your what do you call it? Your trim panels. As you can see, there's some cuts and tears on this paneling, and I didn't do this. This was already like this. Pretty much, this was pretty much like that, and there was this top. So someone has already accessed it before. They already cut it, as you can tell. You see that cutout, and then they had this just glued up top, and everything was secured in, and you wouldn't even notice unless you pulled it. So you could make these cuts and make it relatively simple. It pretty much just gives you access to here. You don't have to cut out the whole thing. Leave a little piece on the bottom so you can push it back into place. They did the same here with this cup. They didn't cut all of it, and you can get these at the dealer, these cup cover plates. There's no part number on either one of them, so I can't give you that, but you can get these at the dealer. Or if you're really good at cutting, just cut out a nice little circular keyhole type of template, and you can pull it back, and it'll give you access to that. Now, in order to get it out, you're going to need a 17 millimeter. If you got a ratchet wrench, that'd be pretty much awesome. You easily just access it, just keep on going at it. And to keep the top from spinning, what I used was one of these, and I'm pretty sure you guys seen it, just to hold it in place, or pliers or needle nose pliers, whatever's your fancy. I don't like needle nose pliers because sometimes they can just slip unless you have vice grips, but they damage the actual top end, which I didn't want to do, so I used one of these. Just pretty much stick it up top, it'll lock into place, and you just held your ratchet up top just to keep it from spinning while you're using your other hand to take the bolt out. As you can tell, I already took out the passenger side, and let me get the grommets out, and all that's out, and that's pretty much done. It's pretty easy, pretty simple. It's not too difficult. I'm gonna go ahead and remove the actual shock from there, wiggle the old spring, and put the aftermarket stuff on. So let's get to it. Whew, man, it's been a long day. I've just been pretty much just cleaning these calipers up, stripping them down, taking all the lines out. I have the hardware, the main brace bolt for the retaining hardware for the pads. Took all that out, took both lines, including the bleed ports. I'm gonna do my best. Best prep work I can possibly do. And it is pretty time consuming, but it's worth it. It actually feels pretty good. Now, I'm not doing a complete strip down of these calipers. As you can see, the pistons are still in here. I'm just going to take this section off, and I'm not really going to paint all this yellow, just enough for it wraps over, but that's basically about it. And I'm using a little bit of well, quite a bit of a 91% alcohol, dousing just a little part of the rag and just cleaning as much as the loose sediment all around here. Obviously, I'm going to have quite a bit of time with this, so I could take my time, but I'm gonna powerhouse through it. Get those rears out so I can go ahead and install all the suspension. It's all there waiting, and it's gonna be pretty fun. All right, you guys, I'm gonna be honest. The next time I am going to get them powder coated. This is just my budget expense. Pretty much just, I don't know if you can see the yellow. I think there's these lights. They kind of make it look a little not so yellow. But I assure you, they look really good. A couple little There you go, that's a lot better. Just using the VHT caliper paint with a good primer and a lot of prep work, a lot of scrubbing. And I have the finished item over here. Right there. Just gonna give it another hit of clear and I should be all good. It's not that bad, honestly. It's pretty good. This is gonna be for now. And then eventually, if they start peeling within the year, or before the end of this year, I'll probably get them powder coated. Take them off the vehicle and get it done really good. But can't complain. Alright, so pretty much I was just prepping the hub for the new rotors. The new rotors stuck a little bit, mainly because of some corrosion, and it pretty much being the original rotor that came with this vehicle. So I'm just sanding away, cleaning it, getting it ready for some anti-seize agent, just so next time when I have to service the brakes or do any maintenance around that area, I don't have to struggle hammering the rotors out, or they don't get seized on top of the actual hub assembly itself. Recommend it. Always use anti-seize on these type of products. You don't have to put so much. Put a thin amount. Too much of it will clump and will get all over the place. It'll be messy. So a nice thin amount like you're seeing here, and that's pretty much it. If you guys notice for these brake lines, just in case you guys don't know, when they send them to you, there's an indicator right here on the bag for front. Obviously these are for your fronts. Just gonna run the brake line through those grommets here. Now, torquing down these little T30 Torq bolts or screw into the rotor to hold it in place doesn't require much force. You don't want to over torque this. This is mainly going to be around 6 to 7 Newton meters, or probably a little less. Basically hand tighten it till it's all the way in and give it a nice good quarter turn just to snug it into place. A little bit of Loctite is an added benefit when you buy new rotor torque bolts. They come with a thread locker agent already applied to the bolt, so pretty much that saves you the trouble. Just so you guys know. Pretty much I'm using my trusty torque wrench. Now I'm torquing these calipers to 85 foot-pounds for these calipers alone. And with some Loctite, blue Loctite on the actual bolts, these 18mm bolts, is required just to keep those bolts where they belong. Here I'm also applying brake quiet, or tacky little glue. They call it the red stuff. Pretty much on the pads. Pretty much helps with vibrations and dampening. Not really necessary, but it's an added benefit since these pads do have shims. It's something that I always do on pretty much all my installs, so I included it on this anyway. Alrighty guys, this is a pretty lengthy video as it is. This video is already stretched out to 30 minutes. I was going to split it into 2 segments, but just to keep it on the same, I'm just gonna keep it under one video. I don't know if you guys are gonna watch through the whole thing, but if you do, I greatly appreciate it. A couple of key notes. This was a lengthy process. I had so much data and so much video pretty much saved on my computer that I was editing, so this was kind of a lot for me. I'm not really that great as far as when it comes to editing, but I am trying my best. It's it's exhausting doing all the suspension work, the brake, the calipers, installing the new suspension, and kind of getting everything squared away, especially in the heat. Pretty much that whole week of doing this project, it was like 103, 106 average. So it was pretty hot outside. So, I do apologize if it was maybe not as informative as you would hoped. I did kind of put some key points. Everything else is pretty much simple. There are some things that I did mention because, those are some questions that I was wondering about myself, as this is my first SLK R171 platform that I've owned. So, all this is new to me, but hopefully this video was entertaining to an extent and was informative. At least I pretty much answered some questions maybe, and you got to see more or less what you're going to deal with if you have to do any of this type of work. I do recommend, obviously, if you have a garage, lucky you. If not, a lot of water, a lot of resting, and try to stay in the shade as much as possible. Now, this is something I don't recommend you doing. This is something I was doing. I was performing a test because I wanted to see how the new shocks would respond to the braking. And I was just pretty much just doing my own little testing just to figure out something. Again, I don't recommend you doing this though. This is already towards the end. I was just pretty much just doing some valve cover seal gaskets replacements, and just doing some fine tuning on my height adjustments for my coilover setup from Yellow Speed. But this pretty much is the end of the video, and I just want to thank you all for tuning in. And for the next video, I'm going to be going over obviously Panzer as far as a PLM XL exchanger upgrade for the front cooling, and my Flenstat Teninsky transmission high capacity pan, which I'm really looking forward to. Have a lot of other goodies for the SLK as well, including a steering wheel install. I just recently uploaded my motor mount from East Coast Zero install from the past video, so scroll through my videos, you'll be able to find it. It's the most recent one. If not, I'll post the link up. Just go ahead and click on the top so you can check that video out. But I do appreciate you guys for tuning in. Take it easy.